القيادة السورية على أرواح مواطنينا وأمن بلدنا.
Assad does not have significant military capability.
إذا قتلونا مع نروح على بيتنا.
Good afternoon on this Wednesday, September 25th. I'm Yumna Nofal, and these are today's headlines. U.S. President Barack Obama is pledging $9 million to the Lebanese military to help its efforts in maintaining security, in addition to the $254 million pledged for humanitarian aid. The administration of the Jarita tourism facility issues a statement whereby it declares that the grotto will be closed for one day due to heavy rainfall. And the United Nations World Food Program says it will drop hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees from its food aid program in Lebanon as it struggles to keep pace with a growing population. At the yearly United Nations General Assembly, while speaking with President Michel Sleiman, U.S. President Barack Obama pledged nearly $9 million to the Lebanese military to help its efforts in maintaining security as Lebanon copes with the influx of refugees fleeing the civil war across the border in Syria. The U.S. is pledging this in addition to the $254 million to pledge to Lebanon as humanitarian aid. In the President's words.
The Lebanese people have been tremendously generous during this difficult period, welcoming hundreds of thousands of refugees from Syria into their homes and their villages. The United States is providing over $254 million in humanitarian assistance to assist refugees in Lebanon and communities that are hosting them. And as you heard me say today, I think it's very important for the international community to step up to do even more. The United States also strongly supports the role of the Lebanese armed forces in maintaining Lebanon's stability, and today we're announcing an additional $8.7 million that will provide needed equipment in support of Lebanese armed forces' internal stability and border security missions.
President Michel Sleiman says that Lebanon is struggling under the weight of at least 1 million Syrian refugees. He spoke of the crisis in his address to world leaders gathered at the UN General Assembly in New York City. And he said Lebanon is overwhelmed by Syrian refugees who have reached around a fourth of Lebanon's population of 4.5 million. He said the burden of hosting them was beginning to take on an existential dimension for his nation. He also appealed for the support of friendly countries to face the repercussions of regional conflicts that are threatening Lebanon's stability and are negatively affecting its economic and social conditions. The impact of Syria's refugees on Lebanon will be the focus of a meeting taking place today at the sidelines of the General Assembly. The meeting of the International Support Group for Lebanon will draw donors and others to discuss the dimensions of the crisis. And back to President Barack Obama, he said the United States is ready to engage diplomatically with Iran in what could be a historic opening between the longtime foes, but put the onus on the new Iranian president to prove he is serious about pursuing a nuclear deal. Addressing the annual summit of world leaders at the UN, Obama said he also wanted to put President Hassan Rouhani's overtures to the test and challenged him to take concrete steps toward resolving Iran's long-running nuclear dispute with the West. Turning to Syria, Obama reiterated the dangers of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, saying, "Nowhere have we seen these trends converge more powerfully than in Syria."
With respect to Syria, we believe that as a starting point, the international community must enforce the ban on chemical weapons. When I stated my willingness to order a limited strike against the Assad regime in response to the brazen use of chemical weapons, I did not do so lightly. I did so because I believe it is in the national security interest of the United States and in the interest of the world to meaningfully enforce a prohibition whose origins are older than the United Nations itself. The ban against the use of chemical weapons, even in war, has been agreed to by 98% of humanity. It is strengthened by the searing memories of soldiers suffocating in the trenches, Jews slaughtered in gas chambers, Iranians poisoned in the many tens of thousands. The evidence is overwhelming that the Assad regime used such weapons on August 21st. Their peaceful protests against an authoritarian regime were met with repression and slaughter. The Syrian government took a first step by giving an accounting of its stockpiles. Now there must be a strong Security Council resolution to verify that the Assad regime is keeping its commitments. And there must be consequences if they fail to do so. If we cannot agree even on this, then it will show that the United Nations is incapable of enforcing the most basic of international laws.
French President François Hollande encouraged the UN General Assembly to end the war in Syria and stay firm on non-proliferation of nuclear arms in Iran, and sounded the alarm on the Central African Republic. After considering military action against Damascus, Paris and Washington finally did agree to a diplomatic solution following a Russian-U.S. agreement reached in Geneva in mid-September. The agreement on the dismantling of the Syrian chemical arsenal is about to be translated into a UN resolution that France wishes to place under Chapter 7, which provides for sanctions in case of failure to comply with its content. Iranian newspapers and residents in the capital, Tehran, reflected a mood of hope and optimism a day after President Hassan Rouhani's speech at the United Nations General Assembly. He used his debut at the world body to pledge Iran's willingness to engage immediately in time-bound talks on the nuclear issue, but he offered no new concessions and repeated many of Iran's grievances against the U.S. and Washington's key Middle East ally, Israel. Rouhani told CNN he did not meet U.S. President Barack Obama at the UN General Assembly because the two sides simply did not have sufficient time to really coordinate the meeting. He did say that the environment was changing because Iranians wanted a new era of relations with the people of the rest of the world. He then switched to English and said with a smile, quote, "I would like to say to the American people, I bring peace and friendship from Iranians to Americans." A team of UN chemical weapons experts arrived in the Syrian capital of Damascus on Wednesday ahead of new investigations into the use of the banned arms. The team, led by chief expert Eki Selstrom, flew into the Lebanese capital this morning before continuing by road to Damascus. The group is expected to examine the alleged use of chemical weapons some 14 times in Syria's 30-month conflict. It went on to say that Syria last month and concluded in a report presented on September 16th that banned chemical weapons had been used on a wide scale. There was also clear evidence that sarin gas was used in an attack in the eastern Ghouta neighborhood near Damascus on August 21st. This is all according to the report. Coming up next, Pakistani rescuers strive to reach victims of a huge earthquake that killed more than 230 people. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Lebanese soldiers shot and killed a Syrian man and wounded 2 others after a vehicle failed to stop at a military checkpoint near the eastern border with Syria. Security sources who spoke on condition of anonymity said soldiers fired at a van carrying passengers from Syria after the driver of the vehicle tried to avoid a Lebanese army checkpoint in Ain al-Shab, about 2 kilometers from the Bekaa Valley border town of Arsel. There was conflicting reports about the identity of the fatality from the 5 a.m. shooting. Now, while one local official identified the Syrian as Ahmed Bakour, another official said the victim's name was Ahmed Abdel Mu'in Yassin. The security source said the wounded were being treated for mild injuries at a local hospital in Arsal. The United Nations World Food Program says it will drop hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees from its food aid program as it struggles to keep pace with a growing refugee population. More than 750,000 refugees have poured into neighboring Lebanon. Some say maybe 1 million. And nearly 15,000 Syrians register as refugees with the United Nations in Lebanon each week, pushing aid agencies to scramble for funds to assist them.
Humanitarian assistance is always targeted to those most in need. So no assistance is meant to be given to an entire population. For the food assistance and for the non-food items, we were not sufficiently knowledgeable about the population to start the targeting from the very beginning of the operation. And so this current exercise is based very much on something called the vulnerability assessment of Syrian refugees. that gave us a very clear picture of what the status of the profile of the people we're working with, basically. And through that, we were able to determine that 30% of households can adequately meet their needs and therefore don't need this assistance.
We have winter that is coming, so it's a big preoccupation for all of us. We all know, and as you know, in which condition many of the refugees are living. The second is the challenge of school. We have now probably around, estimate, 400,000 children that are in need of school, and in which ways we are going to accommodate those children and which opportunity those children will be offered.
We have identified sites which could be used for modest habitation, and we've also have not received approval for even formal settlements of a modest nature. And that's a political decision for which the government has many reasons for which they're fearful of that transpiring, which is why we're putting a lot of interventions into shelter to at least protect people from the rain and the wind and the snow, which is going to come, and going to come with a ferocity in the winter that we all know, especially in areas over 500 meters and in the Bekaa Valley where the winters can be very harsh.
U.S. Ambassador to Lebanon David Hale is highlighting the additional U.S. assistance to Lebanon for both the humanitarian and security challenges that the country is facing, and that was announced by President Barack Obama on Tuesday. He said after holding talks with caretaker Information Minister Walid al-Dawood, this aid helps the Lebanese army fulfill its mandate as Lebanon's sole legitimate defense force and implement outstanding UN Security Council resolutions such as 1701 and 1559. The aid will enhance the delivery of vital services, provide educational and vocational training, and support health projects. This is all according to the U.S. ambassador. The total U.S. contribution for Lebanon to date is now over $254 million in support for the Syrian refugees who have been fleeing the conflict in Syria. The administration of the Jahida tourism facility issued a statement whereby it declared that the grotto will be closed for one day due to the accumulation of stones, rocks, and mud, which had been washed down by the heavy rain, closing the inner roads leading to the facility. The administration expressed deep regret for this forced closure. Pakistani rescuers are striving to reach victims of a huge earthquake that killed more than 230 people and toppled thousands of mud-built homes when it hit the country's southwest with enough force to create a new island off the coast. The 7.7 magnitude quake struck on Tuesday afternoon in Baluchistan province's Awaran district, a very poor expanse of land that is roughly the size of Wales. Officials say 238 deaths have been confirmed so far, 208 in Awaran district, and the toll is expected to keep rising as rescue teams reach more villages in the remote area, which has been shaken by more than a dozen aftershocks. The head of the Provincial Disaster Management Agency, Abdul Latif Kakar, told the AFP 30 people had died in Kesh district, a toll confirmed by a senior local official. And extolling the virtues of Harlem's rich cultural history, Michelle Obama, the first American lady, hosted a luncheon for the spouses of foreign dignitaries in the historic New York City neighborhood she described as quintessentially American. The First Lady spoke to about 50 spouses of chiefs of state and heads of government who are attending the UN General Assembly. The group toured the Studio Museum in Harlem, which was founded in 1968 by artists and civic and community leaders to provide space for modern and contemporary black art. Obama discussed Harlem's place in the early 20th century as the heart of black culture in the U.S., pointing to famous writers and musicians like Louis Armstrong. The First Lady also encouraged the group to share ideas about how they are improving the lives of girls and women in their own countries. The visiting First Ladies from other nations will go home with a gift basket that includes a jar of honey butter produced from fresh honey from the White House beehive and lemon verbena grown in the White House herb garden. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. A reminder of our headlines. U.S. President Barack Obama pledges $9 million to the Lebanese military to help its efforts in maintaining security in addition to the $254 million pledged for humanitarian aid. The administration of the Jahida tourism facility issues a statement whereby it declares that the grotto will be closed for one day due to the rain. And the UN World Food Program says it will drop hundreds of thousands of Syrian refugees from its food aid program as the country is struggling with a growing refugee population. Live in Beirut, I'm Yumna Naufal. Stay tuned for French news with Serge Berberi. He's launching a very special report, and we're starting with Jennifer Lopez today. Take care.
من حرص القيادة السورية على أرواح مواطنينا وأمن بلدنا.
Assad does not have significant military capability.
إذا قتلونا مع